Okay, so welcome to this assessment video with Ross's most stylish Mr. West. Okay, so you've done your assessment, why has the king been whipped? You've got some targets. Let's have a look at the targets now and see how we're going to improve our work. Okay, so blue target then. Before you started this assessment, you probably did some kind of timeline where you tried to put the events of the king being whipped into some kind of order. Now your targets need to include more information from my timeline. You need to write that target down and then look back at your target timeline and include any of the cards you've missed or any of the clues. So for example, I've done it with there's about 8 clues. So look through. First clue, I think it's clue 6. Have you included the information from clue 6 in your timeline, in your answer? Yeah, move on to the next one. I think it's clue 4. Or whichever way you've done it, whatever system you've done for getting the information down, look back through them now, look back through your timeline, and on each individual clue or piece of information that you've stuck in, see if you've included it in your answer. And if you haven't, add it into your answer. It might be that you need to put a star and then add it in, or it might be that it's a new paragraph or whatever. But look back through and get more information from your timeline in your answer. Yeah, so part of the mark scheme for this is about writing more than one or explaining more than one reason why an event happened. Okay, this is obviously the green target. So basically in my head there's 3 reasons. First of all, at first you think, oh, because Becket was killed and the king was involved, that's why he's been whipped. Then when you think about it more closely, there's a paragraph about the rebellion. Why does the king wait 4 years to agree to being whipped? That does coincide with the fact there's a rebellion, and the Pope asks him if he wants to get his support against the rebels, he has to show he's sorry. So clearly that's another reason for him being whipped, some would argue the most important. And finally, and perhaps the most complex one, is the relationship between what we call the church and state, the king and the church, and who's got the most power. Now that's an underlying cause of this, alright? We've seen that Becket and Henry argue about the church courts, for example, and how the royal courts, the church courts, and the fact that churchmen don't have to go through Henry's court. So really you could say in your third paragraph that this is an argument about the church and the king and who's got the power really. Okay, so again, there's your 3 reasons. Have a look back through. If you've only written 1 or 2, add another paragraph in and try and use as much information from the clues as you can. Okay, so the pink reason is to write a conclusion explaining the main reason why an event happened. So don't just tell me what you think the main reason was. Tell me why you think that reason is so important. Basically, a good conclusion, like if a pink target, shouldn't just have 1 line. It should have 3, 4, 5 lines where you've explained why you think the main which you think the main reason is and why it's so important. Okay, so the red target, you've written a conclusion, or you haven't, but you haven't said why the reason you've given is more important than the other reasons, okay? Now, what you need to do is add to your conclusion, comparing the reason you've said, which is most important than with the other reasons. Why is the reason you've given more important? Okay, did the cause you have given lead to other causes? Without this cause, would other events not have happened? Chronology and order is important. Does this make your cause more important than the other causes? So, for example, you could say, oh, well, without Becket's death, that triggered this process that led to the king being whipped. If he hadn't have died, then the king wouldn't have had to worry about the Pope's support during the rebellion, and therefore that's more important. Or you could go back even further and you could say, if it wasn't this argument between the church and the king over things like the church courts and power and who's really in charge in the country, the king wouldn't have shouted at his knights when he was angry at Becket, and they wouldn't have gone off to kill him. So again, you can look at chronology and step by step, okay? Or you could look at something that's an underlying cause, that's there in the background, a theme that runs through several causes. Does this make your cause more important? So again, this argument between who's in charge, is that the real reason why he had to be whipped, okay? Because the king wants to be completely in charge. Becket won't let him be completely in charge because he wants to keep the church separate, really, and answerable to the Pope in Rome. And then, is it this idea that that Henry has to give some of the power back by agreeing to be whipped, to show that actually the Pope's support is important? So an underlying cause could be power here, the power relationship between the church and the king, and that the reason why Henry agrees to be whipped could be to actually, in a sense, give more power back to the Pope. These are quite complicated arguments, but the key element here is this one, more important. Why is the reason you've given more important than the other causes? Okay? And that's what I need to see you explaining. So this is quite a straightforward one, Purple. Can you put complex events in order, even if they don't have dates on them? So you probably did this when you did some kind of timeline before the activity, okay? Reorder your answer and put in the paragraphs in correct chronological order, okay? So you don't want to start necessarily, you've got to look at that and think what is the order they should be in. You might want to put like stars in and like put number 1, number 2 or whatever. You need to show that you can put events in order, even if they don't have dates on them. Okay, so you need to show for yellow that you understand the difference between the long and the short-term causes of an event. So long-term causes of this event would be the argument between the church and the king, which about church courts and things like that. You could even argue that Becket's death's a long-term cause because it happened 4 years before he was whipped. A short-term cause is the rebellion. It's the thing that triggers it. The thing that triggers the king being whipped is that he wants the Pope's support against the rebellion, and in order to get that support, he has to show he's sorry for Becket's death. So that's the short-term cause. So go back through and try and explain whether each paragraph is long or short-term. Finally, it's the amber target. What's more significant? Is it the long-term? Is it the short-term causes? So do you think it's this issue between the church and the king that builds up over a long period of time, with the church courts and Becket and Henry kind of vying for each other? Even before then, Henry and before Becket has having issues with the church, okay? It's a theme that runs through the period, really. Or is it the short-term causes, the trigger? Okay, which is obviously Henry asking the Pope for support, and the Pope saying, I'm only going to support you against the rebels if you show that you're sorry. So what I want you to do is add to your conclusion, don't rewrite it, but try and engage with this idea. Is it long-term or short-term causes that are more significant? Thank you.